The development of the one world church. For false Christs and false prophets shall rise, and shall show signs and wonders, to seduce, if it were possible, even the elect. Mark 13:22, for such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into the apostles of Christ. 2 Corinthians 11:13, the Bible talks about a religious leader who will come to power, and join forces with the political leader who will rise out of Western Europe. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon, and he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth. By the means of those miracles he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword, and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. Revelation 13:11-15, the identity of this individual, who has been labeled the false prophet, has been the subject of much speculation. However, I think there are some clues as to who this person may be. Matthew 24:26 says, wherefore if they shall say unto you, behold, he is in the desert, Mohammedanism, go not forth, behold, he is in the secret chambers, the Vatican, believe it not. The Catholic Ecclesiastical Dictionary states, the Pope is not simply a man, but, as it were, God. In light of what has been discussed earlier about the development of a world church, there seems to be quite a few things which point to the Pope being the leader of this world church, and perhaps the one who will be known as the false prophet. A resolution passed at a Vatican council called for the placing of the Pope on the throne of the world. The Pope is known as the Supreme Pontiff of the Universal Church, as well as a host of other titles mentioned earlier, and in Revelation 17:9, it mentions that the seat of the Antichrist will be in the 7 mountains, and Rome, which was built on 7 mountains, is known as the 7-hilled city. Rome, the seat of world power in the ancient world, is also the home of the Vatican, which is recognized as an independent government apart from the Italian government. The Pope is literally a god to the Catholic Church, having the authority to forgive sins. Dave Hunt, in his expose, A Woman Rides the Beast, analyzed the title, Vicar of Christ, and he found that the word vicar comes from the Latin vicarius, which means anti, or to be more precise, alternate or substitute, which is in line with what was discussed earlier, which leads to the literal translation of Vicar of Christ, as Antichrist. According to Revelation 17:3-4, the color of the false prophet will be scarlet, red. The primary color of the papacy, which is red, is said to signify the blood of Jesus. The color has also been associated with communism and Satanism. It was alleged that Pope Benedict IX, 1032-45, 1047-48, practiced sorcery and magic. Pope Boniface VIII, 1294-1303, was said to communicate with demons, and it was believed that Pope Sylvester II, 999-1003, and Pope Sixtus V, 1585-90, were also involved with sorcery. All of these clues could indicate that the false prophet could be a pope. Some researchers indicate that the false prophet may be Jewish, but that still doesn't rule out the Vatican connection. In 1130, Anacletus II was elected as the pope. His great-grandfather was Baruch, a successful Jewish businessman who served as an advisor to Pope Benedict IX. Benedict requested that he convert to Catholicism, which Baruch did, changing his name to that of the pope. The name Benedict is Latin for blessed, while the name Baruch is Hebrew for the same thing. The conversion was in name only, because Baruch still financed a synagogue in the Jewish quarter of Rome. Baruch's son, an aide to Pope Leo IX, 1049-55, also converted, changing his name to Lee. Lee's son, Petrus Leonis, was the first to use the name Pierre Leon. His family became an established financial power in the late 11th century, and became active in the affairs of the Catholic Church. His son, Pietro, was sent to a monastery where he worked his way up, attaining the position of cardinal. When Pope Honorius II, 1124-30, was on his deathbed, preparations were made to elect a new pope. The Pierleone family offered their son, the cardinal, while the Frangipani family, a traditional Catholic family, offered its own candidate. The Frangipani hid the pope, and after he died in 1130, convened a portion of the cardinals to elect their choice, who adopted the name Innocent II, 1130-43. The Pierleone family held an election the same day, with a greater number of cardinals present, and elected Pietro, who took the name Anacletus II, 1130-38. Rome sided with Anacletus, and Innocent II fled to France, then later traveled around Europe, accusing Anacletus of being an anti-pope. Despite efforts to remove him, Anacletus remained pope till he died in 1138. A year later, Innocent II returned, and after Victor IV resigned, also considered to be an anti-pope, was elected, and served till his death in 1143. The Vatican now refers to Anacletus II as an anti-pope, one who uncanonically claims or exercises the office of the Roman pontiff, and has eliminated him from papal history. 2 other popes were also members of the Jewish Pirlione family, Gregory VI, 1045-46, and Gregory VII, 1073-86, known as Hildebrand, who was a descendant of a daughter of Lee, and was later made a saint. On May 13, 1917, Lucia dos Santos and her cousins Jacinta and Francisco Marta, who were tending their sheep near Cova de Iria, saw their first of 6 visions of the Virgin Mary in the hilly terrain of Fatima, Portugal. A series of others followed on the same day every month till October. Mary gave 3 prophecies concerning the end of World War I, World War II, and Russia. One prophecy said that when an unknown light was seen in the sky, it would be a sign from God that he would punish the world through war, persecution, and famine. On the day of Mary's 6th appearance, October 13th, she had promised a miracle. Over 70,000 people showed up in the pouring rain to observe the event. In a 10-minute display, the sun came up, spun in the sky, plunged downward, then rose again. The crowd, as well as the ground, were dried. Lucia later became a Carmelite nun in Coimbra, Portugal, and in 1927 reported that Jesus had appeared to her and made several prophecies. This is the text of the first 2 prophecies in 1917. The first part is the vision of hell. Our Lady showed us a great sea of fire which seemed to be under the earth. Plunged in this fire were demons and souls in human form, like transparent burning embers, all blackened or burnished bronze, floating about in the conflagration, now raised into the air by the flames that issued from within themselves together with great clouds of smoke, now falling back on every side like sparks in a huge fire, without weight or equilibrium, and amid shrieks and groans of pain and despair, which horrified us and made us tremble with fear. The demons could be distinguished by their terrifying and repulsive likeness to frightful and unknown animals, all black and transparent. This vision lasted but an instant. How can we ever be grateful enough to our kind Heavenly Mother, who had already prepared us by promising, in the first apparition, to take us to heaven? Otherwise, I think we would have died of fear and terror. We then looked up at Our Lady, who said to us so kindly and so sadly, "You have seen hell where the souls of poor sinners go. To save them, God wishes to establish in the world devotion to my Immaculate Heart. If what I say to you is done, many souls will be saved and there will be peace. The war is going to end, but if people do not cease offending God, a worse one will break out during the pontificate of Pius XI. When you see a night illumined by an unknown light, know that this is the great sign given you by God that he is about to punish the world for its crimes, by means of war, famine, and persecutions of the Church and of the Holy Father. To prevent this, I shall come to ask for the consecration of Russia to my Immaculate Heart, and the communion of reparation on the first Saturdays. If my requests are heeded, Russia will be converted, and there will be peace. If not, she will spread her errors throughout the world, causing wars and persecutions of the Church. The good will be martyred, the Holy Father will have much to suffer, various nations will be annihilated. In the end, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. The Holy Father will consecrate Russia to me, and she shall be converted, and a period of peace will be granted to the world. Mary had asked that her last prophecy be kept secret until 1960, when, incidentally, John F. Kennedy, the first Roman Catholic president, took office. In 1944, after recuperating from a grave illness, she was instructed to write the prophecy down. It was then sealed and given to the Bishop of Portugal, and it became known as the Third Secret. It was hand-delivered to the Vatican on April 4, 1957, and kept in the secret archive. When Pope John XXIII read the prophecy, on August 17, 1959, it was said that he was visibly shaken, and he wouldn't reveal its contents, because he said that it didn't concern our time. Likewise, on March 27, 1965, Pope Paul VI read it, and decided not to publish it. Many believed it had to do with Armageddon, and in recent years, various people have become privy to the words written in Lucia's letter, which contained the third prophecy. After the assassination attempt against him, Pope John Paul decided to read it on July 18, 1981. Yet, it still was not released until May 13, 2000. It was reported that the prophecy indicated that the world was to be punished for disobeying the laws of God and turning away from him. When the prophecy was unsealed by the Pope in 1960, it was to be published so that the whole world would know about it. And then the country of Russia was to be consecrated to Mary by the Pope and all the bishops. If these two things were done, the wrath of God would not fall upon the earth. It wasn't done, therefore the country of Russia was to become the instrument of God's punishment upon the nations. In 1957, Cardinal Ottaviani, in referring to the prophecy, said it had to be buried in the most hidden, the deepest, the most obscure and inaccessible place on earth. In 1978, John Paul II said that his predecessors preferred to postpone publication so as not to encourage the world power of communism to make certain moves. In 1980, while speaking to a group of German Catholics, John Paul II admitted that the third secret did indeed refer to impending punishment from God, and that because Pope John XXIII, for diplomatic reasons, failed to honor the stipulations, the prophecy had been set into motion, and couldn't be stopped. The following is the third secret, as given on July 13, 1917, after the two parts which I have already explained. At the left of Our Lady and a little above, we saw an angel with a flaming sword in his left hand. Flashing, it gave out flames that looked as though they would set the world on fire, but they died out in contact with the splendor that Our Lady radiated towards him from her right hand. Pointing to the earth with his right hand, the angel cried out in a loud voice, "Penance, penance, penance." And we saw in an immense light that is God. Something similar to how people appear in a mirror when they pass in front of it. A bishop dressed in white. We had the impression that it was the Holy Father. Other bishops, priests, men and women religious going up a steep mountain, at the top of which there was a big cross of rough-hewn trunks as of a cork tree with the bark. Before reaching there, the Holy Father passed through a big city, half in ruins and half trembling with halting step, afflicted with pain and sorrow. He prayed for the souls of the corpses he met on his way. Having reached the top of the mountain, on his knees at the foot of the big cross, he was killed by a group of soldiers who fired bullets and arrows at him. And in the same way there died one after another the other bishops, priests, men and women religious, and various lay people of different ranks and positions. Beneath the two arms of the cross there were two angels, each with a crystal aspersorium in his hand, in which they gathered up the blood of the martyrs and with it sprinkled the souls that were making their way to God. It was very interesting that many years ago, Jean Dixon had a vision with the word Fatima in it. She saw the throne of the Pope, but it was empty. Off to one side, she saw a Pope, with blood running down his face, dripping over his left shoulder. She interpreted this vision to mean that within this century, a Pope will be bodily harmed. She saw hands reaching out for the throne. She said that the new head of the church would have a different insignia than that of the Pope. Because of the unearthly light, she knew that the power would still be there, but not in the person of the Pope. Saint Malachy, Archbishop of Armagh, an Irish monk who died in 1148, had made prophecies concerning future popes. His predictions ended with a pope called Peter the Roman, who was the seventh pope after a pope whose description resembled Pope Pius X. During his reign, the city of the seven hills will be destroyed, and the awful judge will judge his people. The seventh pope is John Paul II, Karol Wojtyla, from Krakow, Poland, who began his reign in 1978. On April 7, 1970, it was reported that Mary appeared to Veronica Lucan, and had made subsequent appearances to her at the St. Robert Bellarmine Church in Bayside, New York, on the eve of the great feast days of the church. The messages received during these visitations were recorded on tape, portions of which were revealed in a newsletter known as Directives. The message given on October 6, 1976 said, "The plan of communism is to overthrow the rule in the eternal city, gain control in politics in a manner to control the world. They seek to overthrow Rome, these agents of hell and atheism. My child, they seek to overthrow Rome and gain control of the power of the house of my son throughout the world. They will subvert it from within." On May 13, 1978 came this message: "How I warned and warned that Satan would enter into the highest realm of the hierarchy in Rome. The third secret, my child, is that Satan would enter into my son's church." Another message given on September 7, 1978 gave more details. Satan, Lucifer in human form, entered into Rome in the year 1972. He cut off the role of the Holy Father, Pope Paul VI. Lucifer controlled Rome and continues this control now. This seemed to echo what Pope Paul VI said on June 29, 1972, on the anniversary of his coronation. From some fissure the smoke of Satan entered into the temple of God. The third secret has become highly suspect, in that Speck Forensic Laboratories, a respected international firm, has analyzed the document and compared it with past writings of Lucia, and concluded that, based on the documents examined, that the questioned document third secret cannot be identified with the purported known writings of Sister Lucy. In addition, she claimed to have written it on one sheet of paper, which was confirmed by Cardinal Ottaviani, who read it, and Bishop Venancio, who was able to see it through the envelope. Yet, what the Vatican released was 4 pages. On top of that, while the language in the first 2 secrets was fairly straightforward, whereas, in the third, Mary does not speak, it is symbolic, and also contains grammatical differences. While the Vatican sought to consider it a fulfillment of the May 13, 1981 assassination attempt on Pope John, the third secret actually ends with the death of the Pope. It was also revealed that Sister Lucia wrote to Pope John in May, 1982, to say that the complete fulfillment of the prophecy had not occurred. What this all seems to add up to is a fraudulently produced secret intended to divert attention away from what could actually be going on. Though, as a fundamental Christian, I have to question appearances of Mary, visions from false prophets, and prophecies from an unreliable source. I do have to consider what Pope Paul VI may be referring to. In the 1990 book The Keys of This Blood by Malachi Martin, a scholar and Vatican insider, as a Jesuit priest, from 1958-64, he served as a close aide to Cardinal Augustine B. and the Pope. He wrote the following, pg. 632, most frighteningly for Pope John Paul II. He had come up against the irremovable presence of a malign strength in his own Vatican and in certain bishops' chanceries. It was what knowledgeable churchmen called the superforce. Rumors, always difficult to verify, tied its installation to the beginning of Pope Paul VI's reign in 1963. Indeed, Paul had alluded somberly to the smoke of Satan which has entered the sanctuary, an oblique reference to an enthronement ceremony by Satanists in the Vatican. Besides, the incidence of satanic pedophilia rites and practices was already documented among certain bishops and priests as widely dispersed as Turin, in Italy, and South Carolina, in the United States. The cultic acts of satanic pedophilia are considered by professionals to be the culmination of the fallen archangel's rites. In his 1996 book Windswept House, a Vatican novel, which addresses the Vatican's relationship to the New World Order and the next level civilization is to take, Martin begins the story with a description of a ritual known as the enthronement of the fallen archangel Lucifer, which took place on June 29, 1963, in St. Paul's Chapel at the Vatican, less than a week after Pope Paul's election. It was linked, on the telephone, to a parallel ceremony which took place in South Carolina. The book ends up with the Pope, before dying, leaving a written account about it on his desk for the next Pope. A thinly veiled description of John Paul II, to find. According to the New American, Martin reiterated that the satanic rite took place. Oh yes, it is true, very much so, but the only way I could put that down into print is in novelistic form. He also confirmed it to John Leffler, host of the Steel on Steel radio show, where he was a frequent guest, and said that the Pope did not even know about it. On January 24, 1979, at the Vatican, the Pope met for 2 hours with the Soviet Foreign Minister, Andrei Gromyko. Afterward, Gromyko referred to him as a man with a worldview. John Paul said that the meeting was to talk about the prospects for world peace. On Sunday, April 3, 1994, the Parade magazine featured a front-page picture of Pope John, with the quote, "We trust that, with the approach of the year 2000, Jerusalem will become the city of peace for the entire world and that all the people will be able to meet there, in particular the believers in the religions that find their birthright in the faith of Abraham." Note the global implication. The interview inside by Tad Schultz focused on the Vatican's establishment of diplomatic relations with Israel on December 30, 1993, which came during a time when Israel was also trying to work out their own peace accord in the Middle East. This agreement will allow the Vatican to have a seat at the negotiations on the final determination of Jerusalem. The Vatican embassy will be in Tel Aviv, where most other embassies are located, because Jerusalem is not recognized as Israel's capital. In March 1994, the Vatican also established relations with the Muslim country of Jordan, on Israel's eastern border, and it indicated the beginnings of a move by the Vatican to become more involved in the Middle East situation. Pope John said, "It must be understood that Jews, who for 2,000 years were dispersed among the nations of the world, had decided to return to the land of their ancestors. That is their right." Vatican hardliners have criticized the Pope's growing role as the protector of Jews, but maybe this is just a fulfillment of prophecy. There does not appear to be any other figure on the world scene that could be considered as a candidate for the false prophet other than the Pope, with the Roman Catholic Church being the world church. However, do not misconstrue this as anti-Catholic rhetoric. The real history of the Catholic Church is not known to a large majority of its membership, and therefore, even though they have been deceived, it is wrong to indict those who have sincerely tried to live their lives according to the basic Christian tenets as they know them. It is probable that the Catholic Church, as well as the Protestant churches which make up the World Council of Churches, in the coming years, will be radically different, as liberalism and New Age become more pervasive in religion, transforming these churches into shadows of their former selves.